Oh, good.
I am flexible.
Connie, do you want us to walk to the podium? We're talking about that.
You can stick around. So Connie's checking on the mics. Okay.
Hey, Art, who's going to go? You're going to be ready. Welcome all to this Keep Our Republic event. I am thrilled to see you here today, and so honored as Dickinson's president to host this event with some great participants. Dickinson College is a suitable place for this event to take place. As we look only a few yards away from this building, we can see Old West, which is the center of our campus, was the center of our campus, a place that was built with funds from our founder, Benjamin Rush, who was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, John Dickinson, who participated in the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. Their funds, Thomas Jefferson, President of the United States, his funds went into Dickinson. The late Chief Justice John Marshall and many other patriots of the age. So it is fitting on this occasion that we gather here on our campus, our beautiful campus at Dickinson. The country has changed in many ways since the founding of Dickinson College in 1783, when it was chartered as the first college chartered in the New World. Politics was a tough business back then, but it's searingly difficult today. We're now doubting elections, and it's something that hasn't happened in our history, and we're even doubting, I'm sad to say, the merits of democracy. I'll tell you a vignette that brought it home to me. In December of 2020, I was the Chief Judge of the United States District Court for the Middle District of Pennsylvania. On December the 14th, per statute, and it's sort of ceremonial, but it's instructive, when the Pennsylvania electors met in session in the Capitol that day to cast their votes, as they ultimately did for the winner of the election, President Biden. The results have to be certified and delivered to a number of individuals, including the Vice President of the United States and the Secretary of the Commonwealth and so forth. But one of the copies has to be delivered to the Chief Judge of the federal court district in which the electors meet, and that of course was me. And when the electoral certification was delivered to me, the individual who brought it to me was escorted by several Capitol policemen. And that was because on that day there was a fear that there would be civil unrest and riots. So even something as ceremonial as delivering the certification to one of several people was in jeopardy because of the tenor of the times in that day. And of course, I'm no stranger to that, because during my time as Chief Judge as well, just several weeks before, my former colleague, Judge Matthew Brand, had the case of Trump versus Boockvar on his docket, which, of course, was one of a number of suits that were brought by the former president to attempt to overturn the results of a democratic election. Keep Our Republic has been active in Pennsylvania since September of 2020. It was shortly after Keep Our Republic was founded. While in the fall of 2020, All these things took place, and it seems to some of us like even a decade ago. The first events that Keep Our Republic had back then were very noteworthy, were well attended. There was a partnership with the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and the effort has grown since then. The work has quietly continued. I was very proud to be asked to join Keep Our Republic with a number of people I've known for all my career, who I respect very greatly. We've attempted to lend our time and our perspectives to this effort to analyze nuances of Pennsylvania election code, statutes, and case law. Some of this is technical and some of this is not, but there's a great deal of passion that a number of leaders have brought to bear. Today, in addition to those on the panel, we're joined by one of the founders of Keep Our Republic, former Majority Leader of the United States House of Representatives, Dick Gephardt, a colossal public figure and a dedicated individual who, in a very bipartisan way, wanted to be a part of something that would hold fast to the ideals of our democracy and free and fair elections. We are, believe it or not, less than 600 days from when Pennsylvania's electors will again convene, again in the city of Harrisburg. And we're launching today, because the time is short, our Pennsylvania Advisory Council. We're also announcing today an innovative research collaboration that is led by my great friend and our wonderful professor, Professor Sarah Niebler. Sarah will talk about that in just a second. We're honored also today to have as a speaker who will follow me and really needs no introduction to Pennsylvanians, but I'll take the personal privilege of doing so. I've known Governor Corbett for probably more years than we can count, dating back to his time serving as Attorney General of Pennsylvania, the first stint as Attorney General, and then of course he had a second stint as Attorney General, so we go back a very long way. He's been a friend, he's been a mentor, he's been someone who I respect greatly for his dedication to public service and all the ideals that he holds fast, and it is a personal privilege to have him here today and to have him on the program. Governor Corbett.
Thank you, President Jones. Boy, there's a ring to that. Are you busy next year? Thank you, and thank you for joining us today. How do we get here? I got here by an invitation to join a group of people, bipartisan, people that I respected, at Duquesne University, where I teach at the law school, to talk about what's going on in, how do I describe it, the vibe or difficult times that we're seeing in politics and in civic response to that. Many of the people were Democrats, many were Republicans, but they all had one interest. How do we tone down the rhetoric that is out there? Because the rhetoric is out there. And for good or bad, I was the first one to ask, well, what do you think's going on? And I said, well, we've had this before. We've had this throughout the history of our country. Sarah, I'm going to look to you for agreement on that, right? I mean, the Civil War was part of that rhetoric. But what's really changed, and what's changed within the last 10, 15 years, this is my problem, is this. It's communication. And everybody today has a bullhorn. Even back when I was Attorney General, you really didn't have a bullhorn. You may be able to send things out, but social media changed the dynamic. And I think it's kind of skipped over political, civic education. And I'm going to end on that in a minute. We're here today because we don't want to see, I don't want to see, John doesn't want to see, Representative Gephardt doesn't want to see a repeat of what we saw on January 6th. And that's all you have to say. It used to be December 7th. Everybody knew what that meant. Today, you add January 6th, and everybody knows what that means. Both were sad days in the history of this country. We've recovered from December 7th. We need to recover from January the 6th. And those of us that are involved in this, judges, professors, lawyers, active people, want to see this get back on course. During my time in Harrisburg as governor, we certainly had our partisan divides. I'll remind you, my very first budget was a partisan divide. I'm looking at my colleagues in the media on that one. They'll remember that. I was protested the day after I did, actually the day that I gave the first budget. But it was legitimate, reasonable protest. But we're getting ready to do something that I'm involved in another group. It's called America 250 PA. We're preparing for the 250th anniversary in 2026. It's ironic to be on two different committees. I want to see us make 2026 a great anniversary. But what we're going through right now is going to make that difficult. So as we prepare, as the country prepares for that, we need to prepare for responses to what's going on in this country right now, but particularly here in Pennsylvania. The advisory council that is being unveiled today represents leaders, and I do mean leaders, with diverse perspectives from across the Commonwealth. We may not agree on who should be the next president. We may not agree on what policies are out there. But we do agree on one thing. Democracy was established here in this country, here in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. It was defended in Gettysburg. It was protected by the men and women of this state over many wars and continues to be. We cannot let this fall away because we don't know what's going on. We want people to be able to trust in what they hear. And so how do you do that? We're going to get down into, I don't want to say the weeds, local. All campaigns, if they're going to be successful, political campaigns, you have to have boots on the ground. You have to have people in the communities. So our goal here today is to have hyper-localized, starting kicking off today, bipartisan, and that's extremely important. My colleagues in the media underline bipartisan, because too much we're talking about the right and the left. There are a lot of people in the middle, and they go back and forth. Bipartisan civic education. Now, having been a political science major, having taught political science for 1 year in Pine Grove area school district up in Schuylkill County, his home county, it's hard to believe that we have to educate our civics. But unfortunately, I believe we do. And I think many here in this room believe we do. To explain the process, to explain how it works, to work with the county commissioners, to work with local organizations. The people can start talking now in person, or if they want to do it on their cell phone, that's fine. But have that dialogue down at the coffee shop, at the VFW, at the county fairs, between now and Election Day 2024. That's our goal. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Velma Redmond. I was born and raised in Pennsylvania. And after law school, I practiced law in Pennsylvania. Early in my career, I served as chief counsel to the Secretary of the Commonwealth, who oversaw the State Elections Bureau in Governor Casey's administration. And election administration certainly was complex at that time. We were implementing campaign finance laws and rules. But I could not have imagined the breadth and complexity of issues that our elections administrators face today. Across the Commonwealth, there are many people involved in efforts to get out the vote and get Pennsylvanians registered. That continues to be very important work. But it's also critically important that we understand and appreciate and pay attention to the processes that occur after we vote. The canvassing, the counting, the certifications that Judge Jones mentioned. As ordinary citizens, and I stand here as an ordinary citizen, we can help to strengthen our democracy by educating ourselves and others about these critical tasks that occur after we cast our vote. It's important that our procedures for counting, certifying, and canvassing votes after the election remain nonpartisan activities. It's important that we identify and address any nuances and ambiguities in our state laws and procedures now so that we can mitigate against the possibility of post-election disruption and subversion. And it's important that our county and state elections officials and employees are allowed to do their jobs free of threats and harassment. So no matter what your political affiliation or views, it should matter to all of us who care about the importance of a healthy and strong democracy. I'm encouraged by Keep Our Republic's plans for dynamic programming and bipartisan, grassroots civic engagement focused on those issues that are fundamental to the integrity of voter confidence. And I'm honored to join Governor Corbett and Judge Jones and others in these bipartisan efforts here in Pennsylvania.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Niebler, and I'm an associate professor of political science here at Dickinson College. My research is in the areas of campaigns and elections, public opinion, and political behavior, specifically looking at voting. I'm a nearly lifelong Pennsylvanian, living only out of the Commonwealth during graduate school, and a couple years on either side of that when I lived in Nashville, Tennessee, Madison, Wisconsin, and then back in Nashville. My contribution to this project is to do what I enjoy doing most, which is working with students to ask and answer interesting and important research questions. This summer, we'll undertake a project designed to collect and analyze information related to election integrity in Pennsylvania. As you know, in June 2021, members of the General Assembly introduced a bill that would have amended the Pennsylvania Election Code. While the bill was ultimately vetoed by Governor Wolf, we have reason to believe that elements of the proposed bill will be reintroduced in the legislature, again, either as an omnibus bill or standalone pieces of legislation. To our knowledge, little nonpartisan research has been done on the topics that would be altered by this proposed legislation, and little research has been done overall looking systematically at the rules governing elections in the Commonwealth, especially in recent years. As such, we aim to gather data from the Pennsylvania Department of State and local election administration bureaus on issues related to electronic poll books, poll worker compensation, permanent mail-in voting lists, and numbers of people registering to vote and requesting mail-in and absentee ballots in the days closest to the deadlines for each political activity. So specifically, some of the questions we're asking are, and I'm just going to go through a huge list here, how many and which counties use electronic poll books, and when did they start doing so? What's the information contained in each county's database? How much money have poll workers been paid in the past 4 election cycles? How many poll worker positions have been unfilled in those cycles? How many and which counties maintain permanent mail-in voting lists? How many people who registered to vote in 2020 and 2022 after the passage of Act 77 did so in the final 2 weeks they were eligible to do so 30 to 15 days before the election? How many people who requested mail-in or absentee ballots in 2020 and 2022 did so in the final 2 weeks they were eligible to do so 21 to 7 days before the election? And finally, which counties cure ballots, and what is the process by which they attempt to do so? I'm excited to work on this project and hopefully look forward to sharing the results of our research with you at a later date. Thank you.
Well, hi everyone, and hi everyone that's joining us remotely. I know for a fact we have folks from Wisconsin to Florida and places in between that are zooming in. My name is Ari Middleman. I'm the executive director of this nonprofit. I'm originally from the Lehigh Valley, but for better or worse, live in the DC suburbs now. And I purposely, on the way up here, took the back roads, as was mentioned, Gettysburg, and thinking everything that's happened here in Pennsylvania. And there's a small 2-lane road, which I decided to take, that goes between Carroll County, Maryland, and Adams County, Pennsylvania. And you know that you cross the Mason-Dixon. It's one of those blue and yellow markers, and it specifically says the Constitution was born here. If anyone's super bored, you can drive about 30 miles south and you'll see. But my first taste of politics was way back in 1992. I was in grade school, and I had the chance to go down to Washington for the inauguration. And I had no idea what to expect other than I got to get off for school that week. And that was very exciting, and students here would, I think, appreciate that. But I don't encourage you taking off from school. But it's the largest crowd I ever saw, and I just thought it was remarkable because even as a boy in the 1992 election, I remember that every single commercial break, even for the cartoons, in Pennsylvania was awash with television commercials about the election. And we certainly have seen in the recent presidential elections and even last year's elections, I mean, Pennsylvania is going to be ground zero. But I thought as a boy, it's just incredible that even with all that contentiousness leading up, there on the west face of the Capitol at noon on January the 20th, raised the right hand, a seamless transfer of power. But the truth is, I think we've seen in recent years, we can't take anything for granted. And our democracy is unfortunately quite fragile as we approach the 250th birthday of our country. And we just need to work each and every day. As was mentioned, we have less than 600 days really to help fortify this. And that's what this organization that I'm so honored to be the executive director of is working on. On the way up here also, I was on the phone with the former Democratic mayor of of Detroit, Michigan, but also the former Republican State Senate chairwoman of the Elections Administration Committee in Wisconsin, who's spearheading our Wisconsin work. So we are focused in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, doing this type of innovative, bipartisan civic education programming over the next 600 days. I think that with there's unique opportunities in each state. As we know, elections, they're governed by federal law, but they're also governed all the way down to county ordinances and the way we administer. And that's something that we're very much focused on. There's no one size fits all, and we don't know of another organization that's working in this bipartisan way down at the county level to really analyze how to further fortify our democracy. So it's really an honor to work with bipartisan Pennsylvania leaders because, as I said, Pennsylvania will always be home. It continues, just to reiterate, work that began in the fall of 2020, quietly working under the radar in 2021 and 2022. But it's exciting today to take off the veil, so to speak, and really begin active programming. I should also say this evening, we're going to be over in Lancaster with other members of the Advisory Council talking about these themes. And we're going to continue doing this each and every month because the best medicine is prevention. And I think with that, we're going to pivot to one of our co-founders, who I believe is joining us virtually, Congressman Dick Gephardt. There we are.
Thank you, Ari, and thank you all for being at this event. I want to congratulate our advisory council, starting with our leader, Governor Corbett, for pulling this effort together. There's not a lot I can add to what's already been so well said, but let me just say two real quick things. Number one, a few miles, I guess, from where you are right now, in 1789, our founders implemented what was then a very radical idea. And that idea was that people in America have the ability and need the opportunity to govern themselves. We did not want to have an autocrat or a king or one single human being run the country single-handedly without any input from the people of the country. I got to witness self-government in the United States Congress over 28 years. That was my privilege and my honor to represent 500,000 or so people in St. Louis, Missouri. And what I witnessed, as I look back at it on retrospect, was nothing short of magical. What do I mean by that? What I mean was this committee of 535 people that we call Congress decided very controversial issues that we had to decide on behalf of all of the American people. Every time that we reached a compromise, which is what you have to do to solve anything, to solve any conflict in a committee that large and diverse, was that there were always some people who were bitterly disappointed by our decision. But because they believed the process by which we reached the decision was fair, they were heard. Everybody had a vote. Everybody in the country was represented on that vote. Because they believed that and trusted that, they were willing to grudgingly put up and live with that decision. That, my friends, is the highest expression of human evolution. What we're seeing now and have seen the last few years is that people's trust in the process by which we elect representatives and leaders for our country is almost broken. If we can't repair it, and what this council is going to do in Pennsylvania, and as Governor Corbett so well said, bringing it to the local level, which is where everything has to happen. If we can't repair it and keep it, we will lose this democracy, and the radical idea that the founders had a few miles from where you are will be for naught. When Ben Franklin was leaving the Constitution Hall, he was asked by interested bystanders if the founders had decided to have a republic or an autocracy, a king run the country. He said very quickly, "We've decided to have a republic." And then he walked on, but he stopped and he turned back and he said, "We have a republic if we can keep it." That was true that day. It's been true every day since. And if we get to that 250 50th anniversary that one of the speakers talks about, it will be true that day as well. What you're all doing in this council and all the people that are there today is trying to understand how we in the state of Pennsylvania can help keep it. Thank you.
Part of a robust democracy is a free exchange of ideas and an open press, and we're happy to take any questions. I know there's many journalists that are joining virtually. Those we can take after the fact, but anyone in the room, we're happy to try to answer any questions.
Charlie, why don't you identify?
Okay.
Because people are watching on television also, on video.
Okay. I'm Charlie Thompson with the Patriot News and Penn Live in Harrisburg, PA. And one thing I was curious about, you mentioned Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, where you're having these concentrated efforts and the advisory councils established. Is there any method to the selection of those three states? Because certainly there are other swing states, around the country, like Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada. Why are you landing on Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan?
Well, I should say that our National Advisory Board does have a former U.S. attorney from Arizona and a former judge out of Georgia, so we certainly have a footprint and our antennas up there. I do think, to use the term, there's a bit of an ethos between these three states. There's a long-running, is Pennsylvania Midwest or not, but we can sort that up. But I do think that there's similar concerns in each state, and there's similar opportunities in each of these. It is quite possible that we expand with this type of advisory council structure and hyper-localized programming in Georgia and Arizona, but at this point we don't have plans for that.
Well, if I may just follow up, is there some reason to believe that, from your standpoint, is there some reason to believe that conditions are worse here than those other swing states, that we are somehow more vulnerable to the process going off the rails?
I wouldn't use the term worse. I think our premise, to play on words, for better or worse, is that there's a brush fire in the body politic, right? Over the last few years, it's gotten incredibly hot in our country. And in certain locations in these states, they're particularly hot. God forbid, but I think that a few sparks could create a 5-alarm fire. And I think carefully examining, with the tremendous perspective that our advisory council has, nuances, frankly, ambiguities and gray areas in case law and statute, I think it's very prudent to do that now as compared to when we all are getting ready for Thanksgiving dinner. And God forbid, and hopefully everything we're working on is improbable, but I think we have seen that the post-election period can get incredibly contentious and incredibly hot.
Dennis?
Dennis Owens with EC27 in Harrisburg. To address the elephant in the room, you mentioned miles away from Gettysburg in Philadelphia. We're about 12 miles from where Republicans met this past weekend, including Ron DeSantis, all criticizing the pending indictment of Donald Trump and calling into question the judicial system in that. Can you talk, Republicans specifically, actually, but I think you from the Congressman as well, what role Donald Trump has played in this whole situation of mistrusting an election?
I'll take a stab at that. I think that to the leader's point, Leader Gephardt's point, we have a situation where the trust in our institutions is clearly broken, and we have, frankly, false narratives being promulgated, and the brush fire is a good, that Ari mentioned, is a really good way to describe that. I have never seen over my time, which includes almost 20 years on the federal bench, the type of disrespect that we see now for our institutions, and particularly concerning to me is a disrespect for judges and for prosecutors, and then that washes into false narratives about elections. I think it's really dangerous. I think to Leader Gephardt's point, there's always been robust political debate in the United States since the beginning of the Republic, but it's taken on a different cast at this point. And I find that when you see a shot of a former president and a prosecutor, and the former president has a baseball bat in his hand, it to me probably speaks volumes about the tenor of the times. And so citizens look to leaders to influence their beliefs and their behavior. And I think we've reached a really dark and dangerous place. So, in terms of the elections, and to Charlie's question as well, whether Pennsylvania is worse or not is a judgment that I can't make. But when you see across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that county by county there are petitions to do hand recounts with no basis whatsoever, other than just the false belief that every election in every county was rigged, I find that really troubling, and that gets to the heart of what Keep Our Republic is trying to do. But I do think our leaders have a greater responsibility than to pass off something. And I'll just finally say, coming from the judiciary, I mentioned my colleague Judge Brand, who decided the Trump versus Boockvar case. To say that suit was without merit or evidence would be the understatement of the century. It just simply was. And yet there are some people who, still believe that was wrongly decided, which I find pretty astonishing.
Senator Corbett, I don't know that anyone's going to question your conservative credentials, but what did you say as a conservative when role Donald Trump was playing all this?
Well, yeah, I'm not going to address the role of the former president. What I am going to address is the role of people who followed him. And again, I go back to that lack of civic education, or ignoring civic education, or ignoring the facts and creating a dialogue based upon a house of cards. That, I think, is the major problem that's going on there. And I go back when I pull my cell phone out. Newspapers are having a difficult time publishing today, right? Why are they having a difficult time? Social media. They just jump right over you. You can't get whether we agree with you in the newspaper or the media or not, a statement out there that they just don't attack you as much as they attack anybody else. We have gone to a portion of the country, not a big portion, but a very vocal portion of the country, have gone to extremes, both sides. There's correctness, and there's being on the right. If you're not with us, you're against us. That's not how this country was established or grew and has survived for all this time. We're a country of laws, and I believe in the rule of law. And I think part of our process is to help educate all the way back down to the precinct level, the voters, if they're willing to take the information. And not just, well, this is what I saw on Twitter. Personally, can't pay me, I've never tweeted. Okay? If you want to clap, go ahead and clap. It is a form of communication that I think ignores the body politic as to really what you're saying is true. And I always believe that we better be telling the truth, or you and the media are going to catch us in that lie. Unfortunately, in this day and age, the louder you say it and the more you say it, the truth gets lost. So we're going to try and work on the truth.
Congressman, can I get a response from you on that, please?
Is he plugged in? Yeah. Congressman Gephardt, did you hear the question?
Yes, I think I did, so I wasn't sure I was on, but let me respond. I think one of our problem, or a big part of the challenge we're facing is because of the corruption of our information culture. So I'm going to have to give a little historical context here for a minute. Early humans dominated the earth over much more powerful species for two simple reasons. One, bigger brain, and we invented language, words, which allowed us to communicate with one another. In that time, that communication allowed humans to work together, to plan together, basically then for hunting and gathering, so they could survive and thrive. Then came along the written word, and then the printing press. And it was harder when you were reading something on a paper or a wall that you hadn't witnessed. So we depended on who was reporting those facts. And we, over time, produced the profession of journalism so that we could have some sense that the report we were reading was true, or somewhat true, or not true at all. And so we became conversant and able to have much more effective and diverse communication. Then came the radio, then came the television, same problems, but we overcame those problems pretty much because a lot of the journalists wound up reporting on television, and we began to trust some reporters more than others, and we could discern what was pretty true, somewhat true, not true at all. Now comes social media. And we have brought into the journalism profession every human being on the earth. Anyone, anywhere can post information. And there's no way to know, even if the poster is a real human being, is it a robot? And is there any truth in what they are saying? And now I just want to move you quickly to advanced AI, which is the latest development in social media. With advanced AI, I can now talk to this phone and ask it to make a video of Dick Gephardt doing something really horrid and awful. And I can ship that to Dick Gephardt today and say, if you don't want this up on the web tonight, you have to give us $10,000, whatever. So it allows extortion. Think what it can do for Vladimir Putin and President Xi, who want to divide and Americans to defeat America. Think what it does to kids, children, who have little ability to understand if the communication is true or completely untrue. And think what it does to our democracy, which depends on having an information culture that you can basically trust. So when I look at where we are, there are a lot of reasons. We've always had conspiracy theories. We've always had haters. We've always had racism. We've always had hating people who want to foment their hate to others. We've always had people looking for confirmation of their already existing biases. But this information culture puts all of this on steroids. So we've got to deal with that problem. You will always have people that want to use new technologies to do mischief, to do bad things. And so we've got to deal with that problem as best we can. But in the meantime, we have to continue to have valid, trusted elections. And that's why KOR and this group that you're seeing today came into existence. In the meantime, there are a lot of other efforts going on that some of us are involved in to get the social media platforms and the advanced AI platforms to have guardrails around them so that the information culture can be returned to trust and belief by the American people.
We'll go back to you, Charlie. There's one question there. Go ahead. Want to take it, or do you want?
I'll let our host, Judge Jones, take the first stab. I would ask maybe if we could put the list of the advisory council back up on the screen.
This is really the public sort of debut of the advisory council, although we've been operating for a while and adding members. And I would just say, and I want to leave time because we want to wrap up in an hour, but let me say that you'll hear more from us. You'll see op-eds. You'll see members being made available to the press. You'll see people speaking out on these issues. You'll see the results of Sarah's terrific work, which I think is going to be instructive moving forward. So it's an informational body. It's a resource, if you will. And we're just really getting started in a public phase. So the reason you haven't heard much was very intentional. I think Ari and obviously the national leaders, Congressman Gephardt and those folks wanted to carefully plot a course, chart a course forward, and we won't be bashful about speaking out, from this point on. You want to say something?
This is a work in progress. We've never had to do something like this before. There was no reason to do something like this before. And it's a kickoff, like in a football game. Everybody has to change the play at the last moment because this isn't working. We're going out there looking for people whose voices have not been heard, they've been quiet. And they're the ones that are going to have to carry this out. And we want to give them the mechanisms to carry that out. One is to talk with different organizations. Can I say about our next meeting today? County Commissioners Association. Why the County Commissioners Association? Because the counties run the elections in Pennsylvania. And they count the ballots in Pennsylvania. What do they see? We're not omniscient. What do they see as the issues? How can we, through this voice, and I can tell you, we have judges up there, U.S. attorneys up there, both sides of the aisle. What can we do to help? We're just a voice. We can't fix it ourselves, but we can raise it to have a dialogue now instead of after Election Day in '24. So that's where we're going.
I would say one more thing. You know, the problem here, a problem, not the problem, a problem here is that there are some pretty respectable people who are afraid to speak out. They're afraid for frankly, their political lives. And it's become that bad. And, you know, behind closed doors, they may be very candid, you know, about what's going on. For example, you know, there are some national correspondents for an organization that's being sued by, you know, Dominion Voting, who by their very emails indicate what they actually think. But they, you know, there are a number of people who can't speak publicly about things. This is a bipartisan group, and there's strength in bipartisanship. We've kind of forgotten about that in many portions of the United States, but not among this group. You know, we have served, you know, we have some understanding of the way the world works. We're not fettered by political concerns or whether we're going to get reelected to an office. We're simply trying to lay it out there in a way that I hope, you know, is fairly profound for people who are really being fed a lot of disinformation. And then folks can make up their own mind, but there needs to be some clarity here, and we hope to be able to provide that. Charlie, did you have a question?
Sure. You spoke about the civic education portion of this, and I was just wondering, will you also, do you expect to take an advocacy role? For example, if you see things, like Professor Niebler, you referenced the House Bill 1300 from the last session. If there are new bills that are coming up in the legislature, do you expect to take positions on bills if they seem particularly egregious to you? Or if something's going wrong in election administration in one of the counties, do you think that an organization like Keep Our Republic might actually intervene by filing a lawsuit or trying to intervene in a lawsuit? How much advocacy do we expect to see from it?
Yes, I'll say as a 501c3 nonprofit, we don't have any intentions to do any sort of direct advocacy, lobbying, any synonym of those. But I do think the Washington Post uses, it sounds maybe somewhat cliche, but it's the truth. Democracy dies in darkness. And I think elevating awareness at a local level, in certain counties, perhaps what the county has spent on election-related litigation, unprecedented election-related litigation, and letting the voters of that county, the constituents of those county commissioners, it's up to them to raise their voice. I think calling attention to rhetoric that might be factually inaccurate coming from public officials, that's something I think we could do, engaging with our partners in the media. But I don't see us doing anything that would constitute direct lobbying on a piece of legislation or a county ordinance.
But, you know, to be informational, Charlie, and one example is when we had what I mentioned, the petitions for hand recounts. What was promulgated was that hand recounts are more reliable than machine voting. That's flatly not true. It's absolutely not true. And demonstrably, you know, and there have been many studies on that. So, you know, what was being advocated was, well, we'll do these hand recounts and we'll get to the bottom of this because these machine totals can't be right. And time after time, you find that machines are much more reliable. And actually, the hand recount goes back, you know, to legislation which is from the 1930s. It's because there were no voting machines at that time. They did hand recounts because they were the only recounts they could do. That's never been updated. Now, we're not going to lobby or advocate for changing the legislation, but we can make clear, you know, if misinformation comes out, you know, a contrivance that, you know, pulled out of thin air about the efficacy of some type of voting, you know, that's something that I think bears talking about.
So just a bit of color, right? We know that because of great reporting, that the taxpayers of Lycoming County, about 2 hours up the road, about $57,000 of their tax money was devoted to literally picking up ballots and paper for more than 2 years ago. In January of this year, they examined ballots from 2020. It's not our place to say if that was a good use or bad use of taxpayer money, but $57,000 in a county's budget could probably be utilized in many different ways. It is historic and unprecedented to use money to look at ballots 2 years old countywide.
Ari, I saw a hand up back there. Yes, please. Yep.
My name is Kathleen Borat. I'm the president of Carlisle's branch of the American Association of University Women. And our group has already begun a civics education program. We've got a 3-part series that's concluding tonight at the Bosler Library. And it included last week the county commissioners. We had a professor from the War College, a retired judge, and it started with the beginning of our republic, and tonight we're moving through the revenue. So some of us are already doing the work on the ground. We had about 30 citizens come to our first meeting this afternoon. You're all welcome to come tonight at the Bosler. It's at 7. So it's nice that you're doing the work too.
Thank you.
Can I ask you to do us a favor? Can you send what you did to Ari, that we can include it in our stuff to say, this is what we're looking for? Okay?
That'd be great. We could take maybe one more. We don't want to go over it. Dennis?
I didn't hear you say this correctly. Is it just this thing, bottom line? You're trying to educate voters as to what's supposed to happen in elections, so when somebody else says this is happening incorrectly, they would know that's incorrect. Is that basically what we're doing here?
A pretty good description, because I mean, if we doubt the legitimacy of elections, I think we've got a real problem, going forward, and particularly when those doubts are sown by, just straight lies or misinformation, and we're trying to, as a group, a bipartisan group, talk about things that we know to be true, and some things that we know to be untrue that are unimpeachably correct, and people can make up their own minds. But we are concerned as a group, as an organization, from the national level to our group in Pennsylvania, that as we move more proximate to 2024, if this wildfire starts again, that calls into question the results of the election, that it is so destabilizing that it could harm the republic, because we obviously came close to that in the last election. But I don't know if anybody wants to add anything.
Well, I'll just give a quick anecdote. Congressman Gephardt and I were up in La Crosse, Wisconsin in February. A beautiful place, don't necessarily recommend in February, but I won't say who. It was an off-the-record convening with about 20, 25 respected community leaders from that part of Wisconsin. And as someone who had been on the ballot 16 times, if memory serves me, a prominence, I don't want to give away anymore, but of prominence in Wisconsin Republican circles. He said, you know what? I always knew how to get my people to the polls. I knew where we were going to have the election night party, and I knew which supporters I was going to bust down to Madison. I never stopped and cared about what happened in November and December, and what Velma talked about, the counting, the canvassing, the certification process. And I'm thinking, wow, this is a senior former politician, recently retired from the Wisconsin legislature, who had never thought about this. How's the average everyday Joe and Jane from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, or La Crosse, Wisconsin, going to think about this? And I think that's the role of this organization, to help provide that bipartisan education.
And is that the issue? Too many of us never pay any attention to how elections are run, so that when somebody says, because there's always an anecdotal hiccup in every election, oh, look at that, and people who didn't know how it was supposed to work think that some kind of conspiracy is going on. I don't know if you can talk to. Nobody knew who the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania was. All of a sudden, it's a major cabinet post that people are paying attention to, because how elections will run weren't really a thing.
Well, such as voting machines are connected to, the mothership that can invade the voting machines and change the vote totals. Demonstrably untrue. I mean, or they're infected with some kind of virus. Velma, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think that as citizens, we have to understand how our elections work. And if we don't understand it, then that's when we're subject to misinformation. But understanding how it's supposed to work, how it is working. If something goes wrong, what does that mean? But we can't leave it to others to tell us what the process is. We have to understand it ourselves. And part of what we're trying to do is educate ourselves and others so that we understand the processes and the integrity of the processes.
Dennis, I think you hit one of the nails on the head. It's a sad state when we have to explain to them what the process is. But I think the vast majority of the electorate never thought about the process. They went in. I've been going into the same polling place for years. I know most of the people that are working there. It's been hard to get people to work there of recent date. In fact, Allegheny County is increasing what they're paying people to $150 to $175 a day, which isn't a whole lot of money when you think about the number of hours that they sit there. How that process works, once they used to fill out the ballot, now they do it on a computer screen. The computers are relatively new in the greater scheme of things, and so misinformation was very easily spread, again, by that social media. Oh, well, this is what's happening. So yes, I guess maybe we do have a conversation with secondary education. Maybe you need a day of class to explain how it works from the time you make a vote to the time it's counted to the time somebody is sworn in. Because I guarantee you, I will bet you there's a very few number of schools that are doing that. But I'd take it over, I'd look at Sarah in political science department, I'd take it over to the colleges too. Say, this is how it works. Frankly, I'd take it to the military and say, you have everybody here, just explain it to them. I think we're behind on civics. We really are. We talk to a lot of people. We need to get caught back up on it. Because if we're going to be able to reestablish that trust, they have to be educated first to believe the system does work. And yes, the mothership doesn't get anything. It goes right to a central system, and then it goes into another system. In this day and age, we have enough people out there that can explain that, how it works, and how it would be very difficult to do what certain individuals have alleged happened.
Thank you all. Appreciate your attendance today. We'll be pretty prominent, I think, from here on to the election. You'll be reading about, I hope, KOR's efforts. Ari, you want to wrap up with anything? Gov, you want to?
No, I think it's.
Alma?
I think it's safe to say we're going to be spending a lot of time in Cumberland County and adjacent counties. So.
Thank you all.
Close ride for you.